Welcome to Safety Spectrum, your environmental health and safety connection. This program is a presentation of the Michigan Safety Conference. For almost a century, the annual conference has provided credible educational opportunities and valuable support to the safety and health practitioner by offering 120 instructional programs along with exhibits highlighting the latest in safety equipment, instrumentation, and demonstrations. To learn more about the conference, please find us at safetyconference.org. The Safety Spectrum, I'm your host, Sheila Ide. I'm recording live from the 2025 Michigan Safety Conference in Lansing, Michigan, which sponsors these podcasts. I've managed to entice our excellent keynote speaker, Larry Pearlman, to speak with me. Larry Pearlman is the president and founder of SafetyAnd Consulting Associates, Inc. He has over 30 years experience in safety culture, change management, management systems. He serves as an adjunct professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and is also a professor at Columbia Southern University. He holds an MA in Labor and Industrial Relations at University of Illinois, a BBA in Business, University of Iowa. Larry was our keynote speaker on the topic, climate change, how managing your own 250 feet will change your safety culture. So I got to start right there, Larry. What do you mean by the 250 feet?
Yeah, so the 250 feet is an arbitrary number, but it's really about how individual supervisors can control what happens from a safety perspective. They control the mood, they control the performance, they influence how people behave, they influence how people see risk, and they influence the actions they take to mitigate that risk. So it's really about, what can you do independent of whatever else is going on in the organization that you can make a positive difference from a safety perspective in your area and shift that mood. Just like climate changes, you want to change the climate to a very positive safety climate where people are doing what they need to do to control risk.
And that applies to everybody, employee, leaders, managers, everybody.
It really does. And in fact, I'd go a little bit further. It also includes your contractors and it includes visitors coming into the organization that they all affect your 250 square feet.
I know from my experience, often peers don't like to report on peers. They just kind of set them out of the way so nobody gets hurt. There's the problem. You got to break through that communication.
Absolutely.
So how do you start with a new client? What do you observe? What do you ask?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question. When I have a new client, there's always a diagnostic phase. But if I go to a site visit, there's four things I look for very simply to get my gauge calibrated. It's, do the employees smile and talk with you? Do the supervisors pick up trash from the floor? Do the employees wear their PPE? And there's something about the general cleanliness and adherence to other safety rules that you can look at. And I see that really as table stakes, to use a poker analogy. That if they're doing those things well, they're probably doing a lot of other things well. If they're not, we have to take a step back and see what's really going on. That's, of course, goes into a broader diagnostic of, let's look at how people are doing work and the safety procedures they do. Let's look at the procedures that they have and how they're controlling risk. So have they identified it? Let's look at how leadership leads in terms of safety. And let's get survey work or interviews from the people who are doing the work. And I have a certain percentage that I like to get. So 10% of the hourly workforce, 80% of the leadership, and everything in between. And it's really a diagnostic of, do I understand my risks? How well are they controlled? And how engaged am I with the employees?
That makes a lot of sense. I would often, when I work for Michigan OSHA, the first thing I would do, as you say, as you walk into the plant, is can you see, is there a lot of dust in the air? Is it dirty? Is it,
Right.
Is it noisy? Those things you can tell right away. We had a program, they still do. It's called the Volunteer Protection Program, where the best of the best companies are evaluated on the 5 elements. I'll talk about management, commitment, employee, that sort. And there was one, Pfizer, which you mentioned some good things about them. And that was quite an undertaking when we did the review on Pfizer. I must have had 10 consultants working on that one.
Wow.
It's like a little city.
It is.
They have a fire department, It was just amazing, the employee engagement.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. When you
They
see
have
that.
something special there.
They really do.
Mm-hmm.
What's a good definition of safety?
So I think the traditional definition of safety is the absence of illness and injury. And to me, that's really wholly inadequate. It's a good start, but it's not what gets to the heart of the matter. And to me, it's about identifying and controlling risk, because risk is, when released, is what causes people, environment, assets, and reputation to be damaged. And it's a nice little acronym of PAIR, people, environment, asset, reputation. And how do you understand and how do you control that? And if you go further, when I engage with a client, I like to assign accountabilities to those risks from the leadership team that I'm working with. So at the end of the year or semi-regularly, you can look at what is the risk and how well is it controlled, and did it actually work the way we thought the controls were going to work? Because that means you have an opportunity for improvement.
Oh, you probably heard the saying that, you get 10% of the people right away, and then the majority of people kind of sit back and wait to see how it goes.
Sure.
So you try to engage with enough people to kind of get a feel for how the
Exactly.
change occurs, I think.
Exactly. And if you're really implementing change, there's two groups that I don't look at first. And the first group is what I call the Arnold Horseshacks, if you remember that old TV show, where the people are raising their hands going, oh, I want to do it. They're going to be on board with no matter what you do. They're enthusiasts, they're zealots. You got them, you're going to get them. And then the other end, you've got the people who say, forgive the wording, but this will suck just like everything else has sucked. You're not going to convince them. So you need to look at the middle, which are what I would say are fast followers, that if it makes sense to them intuitively, you want to bring them on board. And then you have the people from Missouri who are show me. And you want to get some of those folks who, if they see it actually works, they'll adopt it. And then the two spectrums, you've got the enthusiasts, zealots will come along, and hopefully the resistors will eventually come along.
Hopefully we'll get to a little bit more of that later on about maybe the generations being different. Yeah. So how do you reconcile safety and productivity? Okay, that's the old bugaboo. How do we talk to management? How do we make it important? I don't believe this safety is job one. It can't be. I mean, all of these things are job one if you're going to run a business, right?
I agree. I'm going to go back to maybe Sunday school, if you went to Sunday school. And do you remember the story about the Tower of Babel, that they were going to build this building so high it would reach the heavens, and God got mad and gave us different languages and destroyed the tower? There's a story that when a brick fell, all the people cried because it would take a year to get another brick replacement. But if a person fell and died, there was no time to mourn. And I find that you go, wow, that's 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
We've had that dilemma for that long. At least we've articulated it for that long. And I think you're absolutely right. The reality is business is here to perform good, deliver goods and services to people. And the only safe plant is a closed plant. However, you still have to have safety. And in fact, that's why I named my company SafetyAnd, because
I know that's interesting that comes out that way.
Yeah.
Did I miss something here? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what it is. It's because it's safety and something else, whether it's production, schedule, customer service. Even I'm on a board of a volunteer organization, and they fix and restore rail cars. Well, people there's no schedule to keep, but they like the freedom to tinker the way they want to tinker. So for them, it's volunteerism. And it's about recognizing that all of those move together. And let's be real, let's talk about it. We're not going to stop production, but we're going to figure out a way to balance. And we're going to either balance the message or we're going to balance the risk. And we're going to take that calculated risk of what is our tolerance on risk. Always assuring that someone's never going to get really hurt from the activities.
Yeah, it seems like when I would be working with folks that you have to look at the whole picture. You can't just assume that everybody's going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
A lot of times we don't realize as managers that we're putting the pressure on them from the wrong direction. Or you get a question from someone saying, well, I don't know if I want to put this new scaffolding up just for this job. And you go, because it's really difficult to put it. I go, yeah, but every time you do it a little quicker. You figure out ways to do it. So there are ways to talk to management about how you should do the right thing.
If I could extend that for a bit.
Sure.
When I work with executives, I tell them the difference between monkey DNA and human DNA is only 1%. And we don't like to think about it that way. But if it wasn't, I'd be craving a banana right now. And I tell them that the difference between great leadership and good leadership often relies on that 1%. So They gave the example that Delta Airlines at their airports in Atlanta and Detroit, they have a countdown clock for how long to the next departure because being on time is really important. You're not going to get rid of that. But what you can do as a leader is balance that, have the safety huddle before you start taking on your job for that departure. If you're in a production plant and you've got the production sign flashing how many units you have, you can have a message talking about nothing, no case of product is worth a finger.
Right. So in between all these things telling me get it done, you've got the safety message in there.
Right. And that's why it's safety and. I mean, those are the important things.
When we were doing one of the interactive parts of your talk this morning, I mentioned the fact that utility companies, they're up in northern Michigan right now working on thousands of utility poles and you can't do it fast.
Right.
And it's very hard for people to understand that, but you have to do it safely. You have to look at each pole, each piece that you're going to do, everything, even though you've done it a million times. You still have to look at each job or somebody's going to die.
Absolutely. And if you look at the data, despite the high risk, the utility companies have some of the most outstanding total recordable injury rates. So I look at Duke Energy in my neighborhood. They've been a leader in safety for 20 years because they understand that.
Yep. And I started out in the utility business, so I'm very much aware. And you're talking about people who have spent years learning their craft, journeyman, master, electric, that type of thing.
Absolutely.
So they're not supervised every second. They go out and cruise,
right.
Or they go by themselves. They're two people, so they don't have somebody watching. So they have to know what
they have to.
So, okay, so I described safety climate in relationship to leadership.
Yeah. So again, climate is the mood that you create, what's happening in your team. And the only way that I know of that you're going to get a positive safety climate is the leader's interaction with your team. And I'm a big believer that the more you engage your team, the better the climate's going to be. And that engagement can be as simple as sharing safety performance and asking, how did we get this sort of performance rather than celebrate the number? It could be doing things like a risk assessment and getting the employees to understand what the risk is, the frequency, the severity, and then the natural consequence is how do we reduce the frequency of or likelihood of this incident from happening? And just having those conversations where we flip it. We never ask, are you working safe? We always ask things like, did you do your pre-startup review, or share with me the 3 things you did before you started working to make sure things were safe? Are there better ways to do this? Are there safer ways to do this? What could we do to improve productivity and safety? And it's really about engaging. And we know that engagement connects the neurons in employees' brains to better job satisfaction. And you never isolate safety from productivity, from quality, from customer service. They all move together.
And, from the olden days when I started, it was all about accounting lagging indicators. Right. How many accidents do we have? How many do we avoid? I mean, it's hard to explain to management what we didn't have happen.
Right.
So we're learning to measure things, hopefully, that are of a more positive nature.
Absolutely.
How many training sessions did I have? What kind of testing came out? Well, it's fine. We had a confined space accident, one of the places I worked, and we spent many, many hours, days, working through the confined space procedure. And I still had 2 people not believe the detector, go back down the hole. Both of them survived, thank God. But it was just, so I had them trained. After that, they were the ones that became my main trainers on it because been there, done that, and we know exactly what would happen. But sometimes people just make mistakes. And I always think a safety program has to cover for when we're not thinking. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of ways that work on that. One is just recognition and understanding of human factors that are involved. But I'm also a big believer in safe design. And sometimes it's as simple, like my iPhone and my car had pickup and hang up in different locations.
Yeah.
And there's simple things that no matter how good you can train someone, the brain is not going to make the right decision. It's not going to connect the neurons like it needs to be. And that's up to us to really understand the design and can we do better in that.
That's something I was going to ask you about, the safe design idea. You were surprised that so few people were actually using that.
Yeah, I think it was about 5% raised their hands when we asked, do you have safe design reviews? And
Say my views of what it might be, but how do you describe it?
yeah, so my view is before you even decide what you need, you have some safety requirements for it. And when you start preparing your request for information or your bids, safety is a component on the design piece. So we understand some of the risks that can happen, and we're asking the people who understand the processes the best to recommend how can we make this safer? What are some of the attributes we need to put into it? And I'll call out like Shell Oil, for example. They have a model of design integrity, operating integrity, and maintenance integrity, all linked together with leadership integrity. So if the leaders are doing their part in all three of those elements, there's some very strong element of safe design reviews, and making sure before you turn the switch on that that piece of equipment is as safe as it can be. And one of my favorite things to do is let's turn the tables on the engineers. Instead of them always preparing, how can I take costs out? Let's get our leaders to say, if I gave you 10% more budget, how could you make it safer? We may not actually spend that 10% more, but we want to switch the thinking and change the script.
So it's there if we need it.
It's there if you need it, and then you can make the decisions. Does this make sense for what we're trying to do?
I find a lot of times safety people don't get involved in the procurement part or the purchasing part until after the fact. As I found myself, I go in and look at a piece of equipment. I said, well, you need to guard this and that, which infuriates people. They say, well, include us in the beginning,
Right.
the design of it. We won't have that problem. The other thing I find is an engineer may be sitting at his drafting table and his computer, and he's not going out and walking the
Right.
floor and not asking the employees, what would work for you? Often they have the best darn ideas. So I always made a point of doing that.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Respect. It's absolutely, it's respect,
I
basically.
agree.
So how important do you think peer-to-peer involvement is?
So it's if you were at the session, you saw an amazing video of Pfizer and the gentle reminders and the role of leaders doing the right thing all the time. And I call that the shadow of the leader, that the shadow is actually very long and people pay attention to it. But I also see a very simple example. If you go to Calgary, pedestrians do not cross against the light. And for whatever reason, they've built this culture that they hold themselves accountable, and maybe they hold you back so you don't
Okay.
cross. It's a wonderful attribute of the organization, and I think that's true within any of our organizations, our companies, that the peers are going to set an example and pointing out in a gentle way, you forgot your safety glasses, you forgot your boots, or let me help you clean that up. So I think it's an important thing, and I think psychologically we do what our peers do. And then, so if you're looking for leverage points, it's shifting the climate so the peers are doing what they should be doing, which becomes contagious. And I think about behaviors over time become habit. And we just need to be a little bit patient for those habits to develop and reinforce the positive ones and extinguish the negative ones.
And we've both been around this world long enough to understand that there are leaders, whether they carry the title or not, that other people will follow.
Absolutely.
And you have to find those people and you have to get them on the right path.
Exactly. What a good point.
Yeah. So you made a point about criticism or how to correct people or what works better.
Yeah. So I'm a believer in
Actually stats. You actually gave us stats.
Yeah.
And you didn't make them up, right?
Well, well, we talked about that, the frequency of positive reinforcement versus corrective actions or conversations should be 4 to 1. So 4 times more positive reinforcement on specific behaviors. So it could be as simple as forklift driver, hey, I really appreciate you honking the horn and wearing the seatbelt. Can you tell me why you do that? Oh, I do it for awareness, and the seatbelt is to keep me in the cage. That is so good. It's so important in our organization. I want to thank you for that. And when you have that conversation, you'll get a smile from that lift truck operator. But what you're really saying is, as a leader, I notice this person doing safe behaviors and I'm going to call it out. And that gets to be contagious because that employee knows what's expected, and eventually the other team members get to know what's expected. Where if it's a negative corrective, sometimes you have to do it. Someone's doing something.
Sometimes you have to correct if there's a
Yeah, it's just
behavior that's not following whatever.
Exactly. But if all you look for is the corrective behaviors and something wrong,
Good distinction.
employees eventually will stop doing what they're doing when you come out. And then when you go away, they return to what they've always been doing.
Be a real telltale sign if you're in a company and everybody stopped working when you walked in. That would kind of tell you.
That would do it. Yeah.
And then I have to ask this, I did an interview a couple of years or so ago with a couple of younger female safety professionals. And they were big on generational difference of how they have to treat some of the older folks and some of the folks their age. And how have you found that to affect what you do?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I wish I had an answer for that.
You and I both. They said it's more connection. They said with the younger people, it's forming a connection.
Yeah, and I think that's true with all the generations. At a deep level, we want to be connected to the work. We want to be connected to the people. What I find is some of the differences is patience and how people learn. The ability to read a manual, I think, has just disappeared. So you can either fight that or you can go with what's working. And YouTube videos are amazing. You know, let's do micro learning. Let's do 30-second lessons. Let's do 1-point lesson plans. And that tends to engage them and pass that knowledge on a little bit better. Gamification is another way. You know, if you took someone who's in their 50s and said, you know, let's make a game out of this. I don't need a game, but the youngsters,
Wasting my time.
they like it. So I'm designing a course and we're going to have badges as you complete different assignments. And
Well, you see them looking at their phones all the time. So they're constantly being engaged in something. This downtime is not in their vocabulary, I don't think.
I think you're right. So you can fight it or you can figure out how to go with the flow on it.
Oh, I can remember, like I said, been in a long time when the CDL licensing came out, and I had truck drivers that had driven forever, but I had to get them ready to take the test. And it scared the heck out of them that they hadn't had to take a test. And
Sure.
they knew that they had the knowledge. We just had to find a way that they could say the right terminology when they were taking the test, sort of thing. So you kind of, if you think about it, you do find ways to make it easier for people to understand what you're trying to do. Because we needed them to get their licenses. We couldn't afford to lose them. So, well, it's some interesting perspectives. Larry can be contacted at lpearlman@SafetyAnd.org. Thank you for speaking with me on Safety Spectrum. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor a program or learn more about the conference, info can be found on our website at mishsafetyconference.org. Thank you for listening to Safety Spectrum. This is Sheila Ide.